We'll say welcome to all of you joining in this series, Waiting Room. For the last few weeks, we've been talking in this series about the question, really, what do you do when there's really nothing you can do? What do you do when you're just stuck? When you're like the story we just watched in the video of the guy his marriage isn't bad, it's not what he hoped for, and he feels stuck. What do you do when you get a call from the doctor and you realize this isn't going to kill you, but your life's not going to be the same anymore. It's just the way it's going to be. It's not what you want. It's not what anybody would hope for, but it's just the new normal of your life, or it's something with your job. You're not happy about it. You're not the way that you would want to work, but there's nothing you can do about it, and you just feel stuck. You're in the waiting room. And for the last few weeks, we've been saying when you find yourself in a position like this, often you wind up having these thoughts, and they feel very real to you, but they don't really do us any good. And in fact, they're not even true. You begin to say to yourself, like, I'll just never be happy again. So you have to go all the way back to college to find a time when you think you were happy, and you just think that can never happen for you again because of the way you're stuck in your situation. Or it's one of those situations where you say to yourself, there's nothing good that could come out of me being stuck in this situation this way. And the last thing you want is to come to church, be invited to come to a church, and there's some preacher standing up with a mic and saying, hey, God's at work to bring about something good for you. You're like, hey, give me the mic. I'll tell you the way it really is. Or you just feel like there's really no reason to keep trying. There's no reason to be good. There's no reason to do the right thing. There's no reason to keep going on. But if you've been here for the last few weeks, you know that we showed you a story of some people that they're in worse situations you're in, and when you heard their story, they took away your excuses because they found a way to keep hoping, and they found a way to keep going, they found a way to be happy again, and when you watched their story, they found joy and confidence, and they continue to pray, and they continue to trust God. They find a way to say, God is still God, and God is still good. To God be the glory. And for the last few weeks, we've been reminding you of this point, and I just want to say it to you again. If you're here and you're not yet a follower of Christ, or you're never going to be a follower of Christ and you just got invited to come, it's so easy on the outside to look and think, well, the whole thing of faith is just pie in the sky anyway. But for the last few weeks, we've been saying this, and it's something I really want you to hold on to, even if you've never become a follower of Christ, or if you are a Christ follower, you should hold on to this, or if you used to have faith and you're just trying to come back. The point is that the people who bring us the story of the New Testament, the people that are the writings of the New Testament, the people who told about the resurrection of Jesus, these are not people who were unfamiliar with trouble in their life. In fact, all you really have to do is read a little history, and you read about these people's lives, and their lives are just one unending, continuous scene of things that none of us would want to have happen in our lives. And yet in the midst of it, they found a way to continue to have their faith, even though they had to have the questions of, they never got stuck where a lot of us get stuck of, how can this be true about my life, this bad going on, and how could there be a good God? They found no contradiction between a good, loving, heavenly Father and the trouble that was happening in their lives. So there's a way to get through it and continue to have their faith. And the truth is, they wound up believing something about God that we often don't believe. And so today I want to talk to you about a word, and it's a word that Jesus and the writers of the New Testament, that they want to say to people who are in the waiting room. And the word is the one I just used. It's that word, believe. But it's not just believe. It's believe in something very specific. And the reason that we're called to believe in this, and the reason they command this, and the reason they push it on us so hard is because it's not intuitive. When you're in one of those situations where you find yourself stuck when you're in the waiting room, we actually find ourselves believing the exact opposite of this. And yet Jesus and his followers who write in the New Testament, we're told when they face adversity and they face a set of circumstances, and it's not going to be any different, and this is just the way it's going to be, it's what it is, there's something that they ask us to believe. Now, there are several places in the New Testament that I could take you to that teach this principle, but I'm going to take you to one today because of the person that writes it. And it's one of the things that I find with people who read the Bible, or I guess really read anything, is they don't take into account who wrote it. And who wrote it informs sometimes about what they're saying. In fact, one of the things I often say to people is that Jesus says so many things that I could never say to people, and because he was Jesus, he could get away with it. For instance, if you came into my office and you sat down and you started telling me about your health problem, your job problem, your problems with your kids, and I listen to you for a while, and I say to you, hey, I don't think you ought to worry about that. I mean, consider the birds. I mean, they don't worry. God takes care of them. So today's got enough troubles of your own. Just don't worry about that. Just let that go. I mean, I could never say that to anybody, because if I did, you'd be like, were you not listening? Let me tell you my story again. And when you told your story, I'd listen to it and go, well, no, sounds like you ought to be worried. That's what ought to happen. So I want to read some verses to you that are written that I wouldn't say to you if you were in trouble and you and I were standing in front of each other, but these have proven to be so critical in the lives of followers of Christ who find themselves in these tough waiting room situations. And if you're not a follower of Christ, there's something for you here too. But for those of you who are followers of Christ, this could absolutely change the way you manage when you find yourself in one of these terrible situations. And the person that wrote this is a guy named James. And James has a very famous brother. Anybody know who his brother was? Jesus. I think I heard that out at Madras. Now, many of you didn't even know that Jesus had any brothers. And this guy, James, is the brother of Jesus. And a major part of James' story that always fascinates me, and I talk about every time I talk about James, is that you know what James did when Jesus first started saying, I'm the Son of God, and he started doing miracles, and he went around teaching, and crowds were following him? You know what James did? James didn't believe it at all. I mean, James was silently, I mean, he'd mock his brother when in front of the crowds. He'd go around and he didn't buy the miracles or any of that kind of stuff. In fact, James was embarrassed. He went to his brother and he said, hey, stop all this. You're embarrassing us. But then he saw his brother die, and he saw his mother cry, and he saw his brother resurrected 3 days later. His brother came and appeared personally to James. And after that happened, James went from calling Jesus brother to calling him Lord. James became one of the leaders of the church in the city of Jerusalem, the place where Jesus has been crucified and resurrected, the movement of Jesus followers there. James became a leader of that movement. And he writes a little letter. It's a very short little thing. We call it a book, but it's just a little letter included in the New Testament for us. And here's what I want to say to you. And I know many of you aren't readers, but if you're here and you have a computer, really if you just have a phone, you have the opportunity to download the Bible for free on your phone. In fact, you can get Bibles on your phone for free. Just go to the App Store, and you get a better Bible than you could buy for several $100s just for free. And here's what I want you to think about. Even if you don't believe any of the Bible is inspired, I mean, you read other things that you don't believe are inspired. You have the opportunity to read a letter that's over 2,000 years old that was written by the brother of Jesus. And in this little letter, James says something to those of us who are in the waiting room. And what I want to do is I just want to read it to you, and I'll make some comments on it. Here's what James says. He says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever," no qualification there, "whenever you face trials of many kinds." Now, that's just another of those things that I can't say to people in trouble. I think you should count it joy that the test came back bad from the doctor. I think you should consider joy that you lost your job. I mean, I could never say that kind of thing, because if you're in one of those situations, I mean, even if you're in it right now, you just hear me read it, you're thinking to yourself, that's stupid. I'm not going to consider this joy. I'm not going to do this. But James says to you, consider. Would you just consider? James is saying, look, when bad things happen, the same thing happens to all of us. When you begin to head south in the way of thinking, you want to hit the eject button and you want to get out of the pain, you want to figure some way to fix it. When bad things happen and you want to resist it and you want to have somebody make it right, James says, here's what I'm asking you to do. would you consider that you need a new way of thinking about what's going on in your life? Now, you don't have to do any of what he's saying yet. I just want you to hear it. He says, instead of considering it terrible, instead of considering it the worst thing that's ever happened to me, and considering the fact that, oh, my life is over and I'm just stuck in this terrible situation, before you do all of that and you head down that trail, I want you to consider that it could be the source of something good. To which all of us in trouble are saying, what? I'm not going to do that. There's no way this applies to me. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face, and that word is just, it's about surprise. It's the kind of word they would use for a robbery, or it's a kind of thing of when something happens to you all of a sudden. It's when my business is going so good and things are clicking along, and then boom, something happens. I'm just caught by surprise. It's when the doctor calls. It's when your mom calls. It's when your sister calls. It's when out of the blue you get your kid calls and you know something's wrong. It's when the boss calls you into the office and nobody's getting raises. He says, instead of considering that this is the worst thing and oh my goodness, what's going to happen to me and what's going to happen to my family, consider that this could be the source of something good in your life. Then he continues and he talks about something that all of us, we intuitively know. He says, because you know that the testing of your faith. He's just admitting what you already know, that trouble has a way of putting your faith on test. Trouble is a way that you wind up putting God on test. When trouble hits you personally and it hits you deeply, it comes to that point that you begin to go, like, what's going on? Why is this happening to me? Why would this happen to me? I'm a good guy. I'm a good dad. I'm a good husband. Why is this happening to me? James just says, look, trouble often tests our confidence in our God. And I'll tell you, I'm so glad that James, the brother of Jesus, wrote those words, because what it means is he's been there. And he knows what's going on in some of our minds right now when you're in the waiting room. He continues, knowing that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Trials or trouble produce perseverance in you. Now, when you read the teachings of Jesus, or you read the writings of the followers of Jesus that we have in the New Testament, what you find is that a persevering faith is the faith that most honors God. When you read about the people that are written up as the heroes of the faith in the Bible, they don't have a perfect faith. That's not what's most honoring to God, a faith that never gets it wrong. It's a faith that perseveres in spite of what's happening in their life. And the truth is, that kind of faith is the kind of faith that you honor as well. When you're with somebody and they always get a yes from God, like everything's always great in their life and God's just blessing them for everything, you don't look at them and think, wow, what a great God they have. You think, that's sort of like magic. And what you want to know is, you don't fall in love with their God. You fall in love with, how did they do that? Can I want to be like them? Tell me what your secret is. How do I get what you got? See, when you hear somebody that everything's always up and to their right in their life and it's because God's always blessing them, everything's going good, what you fall in love with is the results. But when you meet somebody and you hear their story and you realize that everything's not the way it ought to be and you can't believe they've gone through it and they trust in God anyway, you're attracted to that. And you don't want what they had to go through. But you hope that you have the confidence that they have. It's a persevering faith in the midst of trouble that attracts you to their faith. That's what turns your head. That's why James says, look, when the bottom falls out, when things are really tough, before you take the nosedive, before you take the door out, before you hit the eject button, before you do something stupid, consider, is it possible? Is it possible that this could be the source of something good? Could God be about something good? And the good that he could be about is developing and enduring, persevering faith in me, because that's what's most honoring to God. And then James gets to his main point. He writes this next statement as an imperative. It's what he's been driving at. He says, let perseverance finish its work. In other words, look, God's at work in you. I mean, God's at work in you. And you can hit the eject button, you can hit the divorce button, you can hit the quit button, you can hit the bankruptcy button, you can hit the lie button, you can hit the cheat button, you can hit the adultery button, you can hit the I'm going to drug it button, I'm going to hit the weed button, I'm going to hit the oxy button, I'm going to do something to get me out of the pain. You can hit any of those buttons. You can do all kinds of things to relieve your pain. James says, wait. Before you do that, God's up to something. God is up to something. He's in the process of building the kind of faith that honors him most and the kind of faith that awes other people. It's a kind of faith. Let perseverance do its work. Let it finish its work. Now, there's a sense in which when you, and we've said this in this series, I said to you a couple of weeks ago, we talked about this a couple of times. There's a sense in which the greatest tension in your life, that bad test result the doctor called about, that sickness that won't go away, what you're concerned about with your kid, that greatest tension in your life, the thing that you're not even a person who prays regularly, but now you pray all the time. I mean, that greatest tension, and now when you pray, this is what you pray about, that thing. I mean, you're the person that never talked to God very much, but now you talk to him all the time, and you got the rabbit's foot, and you wear a cross, and you got a crystal. I mean, you become the weird religious guy that you know. That thing in your life, that thing that you're worried about that causes you so much frustration in your life, that thing has become the focal point of God's work in your life. If you will allow it to, if you will trust him. Whatever your greatest tension is God's greatest opportunity if you trust him. Let perseverance finish its work. Now, some of you, this is your story. And I'm not talking down to you. This church, we started this church all those years ago. We started it for people who never had faith, who'd never done church, who had done church and walked away and were coming back. We loved those stories. And we hear this story all the time. The story goes like this. Something happened in my life, and it was so bad, and it hit me so hard. And I looked at God and said, hey, if that's what's going to happen, then you just forget it. And I walked away. And when I walked away from God, things didn't get better. It's got more complicated. I didn't get out of the pain. It's had more consequences. Once you hit that button, and you left God, you left your faith, whatever, we don't hear the kind of stories where people say, hey, something happened, and I looked at God and said, forget it, and I walked away, and suddenly I made better decisions, and my life got simpler, and I found more love for people, and I found a better community, and I was more outgoing. My life got so much better once I got God out of the mix in my life. See, once you hit the eject button, we hear all the time, something bad happened. And I looked at God and I just walked away. I told them I was gay and they couldn't handle it, so I left that church behind and I said, whatever. And I know why I left, but I wish I hadn't, because it didn't make things better. It just made things more complicated. James would say, look, I understand. I'm not looking down on you. I have been where you are. Believe me, I understand you. Let perseverance do its work in you, because in the end, you're going to bring more honor to God, and you are going to be in a better place. He goes on. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature. How do I become a mature follower of Jesus? You let perseverance do its work. I was hoping for a Bible study or a book I could read. See, that'll make you smart about the Bible. It won't make you mature. I was hoping, what about if I just obey everything the Bible says? Well, that'll make you obedient. James says, you want to be mature? For friends of mine who love puns, and there's some of you who just love puns, there's a pun in this verse that James writes, but he writes it in Greek, so you're going to miss it. The word mature that he used is really the word for complete or finish. And here's what he really writes. Let perseverance complete its work, so you will be complete. Let perseverance complete its work, so you will be complete. In other words, if you bail out and you don't let perseverance complete its work in you, then you're never going to be complete. If you just hit the eject button and you run away, you hit the divorce button, you drug it away, you are never going to be mature and complete. You will not be complete. There will always be something you lack. Now, this again is just something that Jesus taught, and to be honest, it's something that most of us already know. There's just something about perseverance that makes us stronger. There's something about perseverance that makes us deeper. There's something about having a persevering stick-to-itiveness that just develops your faith and develops you, and it makes your story way more attractive to people that are around you. And this isn't a new idea. I mean, but spiritual maturity, you may never have thought about this before, but spiritual maturity in the Bible is not found by being perfect in everything God says to do. Read the book of Hebrews chapter 11 where it lists all these heroes of the faith. None of them were perfect. Many of them did terrible things, but they persevered. God always honors a persevering faith. And so do you. I mean, have you ever met a really super spiritual person who they're so good that they're just a little too good for you? And you're like, so you never? Never. I never. And you always? Yeah, I always. So you never? No. And you always? Yeah, I never and I always. And when you're around people that always get it right and they never do wrong, you don't want to take them out to lunch. You don't want to hang out with them. There's a little something like you want to put them in a museum that you can take people and go, hey, you ever seen one of those? They never. They always. They're like an exhibit of something. I mean, you look at them, but you don't think that you can ever be like them. They aren't inspiring. They're actually a little intimidating. Then you meet another kind of Christ follower, and they aren't at all what you expected. They're a little rough around the edges than your mama taught you that people who followed Jesus were, and their story's a little different. But their confidence in God goes way down deep. You hear their story, and it's not about a perfect life where they ever got everything that went on in their life right. But God brought them in the face of death. God held on to them, and their confidence in what God can do in their life, it is deep. And when you hear them tell their story and you listen to their trust in God, you think, I hope if I am ever where they are, I want to be like that. I want to know what they know. I want to have that kind of confidence in God. When you're with a person like that, you've met a person who perseverance has done its work, and their faith and their confidence in God, it's so attractive to you. You met a person who's mature. And when you're around them, all your excuses of why you need to escape and all your excuses of why you couldn't have done anything different, they just go away. And you find yourself thinking to yourself, I don't want to become what they became, the way they had to go through it. I do not want to go what they went through. But I sure do want to be like them. That's why James says, come on. Let perseverance do its work. Now, one of the things I love about the Bible is it's just so realistic. And James knows that some of you are sitting there listening to this and you're thinking, I can't argue with anything you're saying. But I don't like it. I don't want to hear it. Here's what I want to hear, Ed. I want to hear that God blesses all the blessable people. And all I need to do is get my life into a blessable position, and to be blessable, I just need to read the Bible, and I need to pray, and I need to tell people about Jesus, and I need to go to church, and I'll be blessable. God blesses all blessable people. And James knows we have these fears and we have these frustrations, so he writes this next thing. And it's kind of a cool verse that people like to take and they lift it out of context, but I just want to remind you, this verse is in the context I just set for you. So he says, if any of you in the waiting room, if any of you who have your finger on the eject button, if any of you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. James is just saying, I know everything I just said is hard. And I know it sounds almost impossible when you're in the middle of it to just think God could be up to something good and I'm going to let perseverance have my work. When you get in the middle of it and you don't understand and you're going like, well, God, what is up? Just turn to God and go, God, I want to trust, but I need wisdom. God, I need your help. I need wisdom so badly. God, what's going on? I don't see this the right way. I'm trying to trust you, and I don't want to bail, and I don't want to do something stupid, but God, I am right on the edge. I need wisdom. And you know what wisdom is? Wisdom is just the ability to see my current circumstances in a broader context. Wisdom is me taking my circumstances, my bad health report, it's my trouble with my kid, it's my marriage, it's my circumstance that get me so focused. I don't have a job and I don't know what I'm going to do. What's going to happen to my family? What's going to happen to my wife? And what's going to happen if something happens to me? Where my kids are going to be? That I get so hyper-focused on my circumstance that I can't see anything. Wisdom is when somebody can help me see that in a broader context. See, this is what all of you who are really good parents, it's what you see for your kids. It's what you wish you could give them, your wisdom. It's, you know, your kids come home from school and somebody did something horrible to them and their boyfriend, girlfriend broke up with them. They didn't get the grade and everybody know they don't have any friends. And you listen to them and you know, here's what you're thinking while you're listening. You're thinking, in a month, this won't matter to you. In 6 months, I guarantee you it won't matter to you. I mean, if you're a good parent, you sit there and you listen and you go, oh, that's so bad. I'm so sorry, sweetie. I'm so sorry, sweetie. But what you're thinking to yourself is, oh, man, if I could have a middle school problem again. Oh, God, it's just like a high school issue. What you want to say to them is, all these people you're worried about, you won't care about them 5 years after high school. This isn't that big a deal. You want to take their problem and you want to put it in a broader context, but they can't see it. James says, when you're in a situation and you're in the waiting room and you don't understand, would you just pray to God and ask for wisdom? And wisdom is to see your circumstance in the broader context. God, I need to see this the way you see it. God, I'm so caught in my circumstance. God, give me wisdom to see what's going on in this circumstance. And then before he ends, he says, but, and this is really important, so don't miss this. He writes, but when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. When you ask, you must say, God, this hit me out by surprise. It's out of the blue. It's like a punch in the gut, and I don't know what you're up to, but God, I'm trying. I have confidence that you have my good in mind, and I'm trying to hold on to you. Help me see this as you see it. When you ask, you have to believe. God's a good God. He's a good Father. He has your best in mind. God is at work in all of this. You have to believe that and not lose your confidence. Not in you. Not lose your confidence in God. Because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed back by the wind. That you take your eyes off God and you begin to look at the circumstances. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. So to put this all together, here's what he says. When you find yourself in one of these waiting room situations, when something comes along and it surprises you and it shocks you and it hits you out of the blue and you realize, I'm in a situation, this is the new normal, don't assume the worst. Don't allow the fears in your head to begin to talk to you and think about, I'll never get anything good could come out of this. Instead, consider that God could be up to something good, that something could be coming out of this that will work in you, and let perseverance do its work in you so that you will be complete. So when you're in the waiting room, believe. And don't doubt. Believe that there's a good God who has good purposes for you. And consider that God might be up to something for your good. So next week is our final week in the Waiting Room series, and I hope you'll be here for that. But let me talk to you for a second about some next steps. You know, every week we hold up these little cards, and maybe you weren't here when we did the welcome and pointed out to you. Maybe you're sitting on it right now. But we ask you to take and write your name and your contact information on it. And I get if you're a first-timer why you might not want to do that, but let me just tell you, we don't come and bother people at their home. Really, all we want to do is try to connect with you and let you know how grateful we are that you came and you gave us an hour of your time. And we want to try to honor you and bless you in some way. In fact, we have a book that's out near the information area, and it's a book that'll help you in your spiritual life really wherever you are, and we hope you'll pick that up. But we'd really like to know that you were here. And we really do pray for these next steps. In fact, if you'll turn it in, just put out whatever contact information you're comfortable putting down, fold that and drop it in the offering. We'll pray for you and what God's leading in your life, and we want to do that. So would you do that for us, please? But every week we also talk about next steps. And the reason we talk about next steps is we don't believe you came here by accident, that you joined in on this by accident. And God wants to take you to another place. Maybe the only next step you can honestly take is just that, hey, I'm going to come back next week for the conclusion of this series. I'm going to continue to hear what God has. You can just check that box on there. There's one, the second one on there is one that I want to urge everyone that you would consider doing. It's that you would consider beginning to pray this prayer when you're in the waiting room. Father, I choose to believe that you will use this until you choose to remove this. Give me wisdom to see as you see. Would you just say that with me? It's on the screen. Father, I choose to believe that you will use this until you choose to remove this. Give me wisdom to see as you see. One more time. Father, I choose to believe that you will use this until you choose to remove this. Give me wisdom to see as you see. Now would you bow and let me pray for you. Father, thank you for our opportunity to be together to learn. Thank you for people that are joining in, many who are in waiting room circumstances that they don't know. It's like it just came on them by surprise. Would you help them now to consider that you're up to something good? To have the confidence that you're a good God who's at work in their life. Father, help them to see it as you see it. Thank you for Jesus. In his name I pray. Amen.